back to pass this, quote, deal. Man, what a deal.
Well, tell us about this deal.
Well, it's garbage. I'm just going to be very blunt. It was not worth the paper it's written on. My Republican colleagues who are out pimping the deal should stop it. They're going to have egg on their face as history looks at this and reviews that the American people are the ones who got hosed. $4 trillion of additional debt, $4 trillion, for what you can best say was a 2-year spending freeze, literally a 2-year spending freeze. And frankly, it's not even that good, because when you look at through all the smoke and mirrors and you've got, we reclaimed COVID money. No, you didn't. You had $28 billion of COVID money. You took $6 billion, and the $6 billion were then actually set aside, but $22 billion were put over the Department of Commerce for additional spending in the future out of the Department of Commerce. You've got other dollars that they are going to play with, like IRS money. They say, we took care of the IRS. Well, $1.4 billion is all that they've allegedly cut. And then they say, don't worry, we'll take a little bit more of that money out of IRS money to do what? To go hire more bureaucrats than the rest of the government. Look, they tried to say that we have work requirements, but then the CBO scored it and said we actually expanded the cost because we expanded the population of people who would get benefits under SNAP, TANF, and so forth. This is all smoke and mirrors. It's the Washington game at its worst. The American people are the ones left holding the bag. The only thing I will say is you had 71, really 72, because Lauren Boebert couldn't make it to the floor. 72 people opposed this bill on the floor of the House. You had 31 Republicans oppose it on the floor of the Senate. And I think it's very clear that this was a Democrat-centric bill based on their now pretty much taking a victory lap the last 48 hours.
Well, they do have some people, like, for instance, I think you're probably one of the most principled people in the House, but so is Congressman Thomas Massie, is someone I deeply respect, and I earned a ton of respect for during COVID for being so bold. He voted for it, and he said that this is he's been in Congress for a decade, and this is the first real bill that cuts spending.
Well, Thomas is wrong. I love Thomas. But when you say it cuts spending, one, you've got mandatory spending continuing to go up. Number two, again, with the smoke and mirrors, I don't believe this actually cuts spending. I think it's at best a break even for 2 years. And then third, when you say that it cuts spending, isn't that great? It's cutting the rate of growth in the end. That's all we're getting out of this deal. And with all due respect, when we set out to do this, right, the purpose here was to actually have a trajectory shift against a Democrat regime that is actually destroying our country, right? So why are we going to just sit down and take peanuts? They continue their entire radical green agenda, completely left intact. The Democrats come in power during President Trump's regime. What do we get? Impeachment. They went to war with the Trump regime. What do? We sit back and we beg for crumbs. It's absolutely astounding to me that my colleagues will stand up and defend a bill that will extend the debt ceiling. Okay, I want everybody to understand that. $4 trillion. Say it out loud. I'd like anybody to come defend. $4 trillion. When you leave the Green New Deal intact, you get no real work requirements. You get at best a spending freeze for 2 years, which in the end will probably be blown up during the appropriations process, because the same fools who cut the deal will cut a deal in the fall when the defense hawks say, sorry, we need more money for defense.
But, I'm sure you'll people like, Speaker McCarthy say, we've got one body, we only have the House, right? We're working against a Democrat-controlled Senate, a Democrat president. What would you say to that?
We were winning the polls by sticking to the plan that was agreed to in January. We agreed to spending levels at 2022. And we were working down that path, just like we did when we passed the Limit, Save, Grow Act, just like we did when we passed the border bill. And look, I was happy to sit in a room and work and figure out how we could negotiate with our friends and colleagues, have different views across the conference. But now you go in and you go and cut a deal with the Democrats. And explain this to me, Lisa. Ask Kevin. Ask any of the people who voted for this bill. Why is it that Democrats are out praising the bill? Why is it that there were 6 Democrats in the Senate who voted for it and only 17 Republicans in the Senate? Why is it that more Democrats voted for the bill than Republicans in the House? Why did 71 Republicans vote against it on the floor compared to 40-something Democrats? Somebody explain to me why the Biden White House is out going, hey, this preserves our whole Green New Deal. Hey, don't worry. We can waive all of these so-called administrative regulatory reforms. Of course they can. They get the joke. Democrats play for keeps. We play for crumbs. We're tired of it. That's why we tried to set a deal in January. That deal was not followed. So now we got to get back to the table and figure out what we're going to do.
And if you're just tuning in, I'm Lisa Booth filling in for Dan Bongino. We've got Congressman Chip Roy with the great state of Texas on the line here. Congressman, it does feel like, so I was supposed to talk about this on Fox News one day, and, producer asked me my thoughts, and I said, you know what, like, it just all seems like BS to me because both parties spend so much money, and it seems like the fight isn't ever over the spending, it's over what we spend the money on.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I mean, honestly, and that cuts to the chase. Like, if you go look at the no votes among Senate Republicans, kind of half, I don't know if it's exactly half, but a chunk was from the fiscal conservative perspective. The other chunk, or half, was from the defense hawks who didn't think it was good enough to spend more money on defense. Look, here's the thing. We're either serious about dealing with spending or we're not. I would ask all my colleagues who couldn't muster the courage to simply return our spending to pre-COVID levels for the bureaucracy, for the non-defense bureaucracy. I would ask them, how are you going to deal with mandatory spending, Social Security, Medicare, deal with burn pits in the VA? How are you going to deal with all of that stuff on autopilot if you don't even have the courage to go cut the freaking FBI? Like, come on, seriously. Like, Republicans will always find a reason to figure out how not to do their job. Democrats play for keeps. We end up with the radical new Green Deal. You understand that the subsidies put in place last August will completely decimate the American grid and our ability to produce reliable energy? And Republicans are just whistling past the graveyard. They're just like, oh, look at us. We got a spending freeze. Pat me on the back. The Wall Street Journal is happy. They love me because we didn't default. And all of my donors from Wall Street, they love me. Meanwhile, the hardworking plumber in San Marcos, Texas is saying, what the hell? What happened to the American dream? That's what's going on, Lisa.
Do you think that's what it is? Because I agree with you. Democrats play for keeps, and it does seem like too many Republicans, want that pat on the head. They want to be invited to the dinner parties. They want, They want to be quote unquote socially acceptable, right? Is that what's behind it? Is that why Democrats play for keeps and we don't?
I think so. Let me just tell you the reaction in the last 48 hours.
Yeah.
I had multiple people on an airplane flying back to Texas that I don't know from Adam pull me aside and shake my hand and thank me. They're not my constituents. They just said thank you for fighting. Had a guy from Providence, Rhode Island coming down for like a strongest man competition. Remember the old ESPN? They used to throw the kegs over the walls and stuff. It's one of those deals. It was awesome. These guys were great. Anyway, the guy goes, hey, wait, I think I know you. I go, uh-oh. He goes, I saw you on TV the last couple of days. Hey, you gave a great speech. Thank you. Man, they screw us, don't they? I'm like, yes, they do. They do. And you know what? The only people complaining to me, 3 or 4 donors who sent in their little form with a black X on it saying, hey, if you don't stick with leadership, count me out. Don't send me another money request. And a Wall Street Journal, which they've never met a deal they didn't love, that ultimately walked away from the actual fight so long as it preserved their, financial, sensibilities of all the finance networks in New York, right? Those are the people that are talking about how, oh, look at how great this deal was. The average American is going, what the hell? $4 trillion, and what did I get?
Yeah, I mean, I think that seems to be sort of a consistent theme where people feel like, the folks in D.C. don't really care about them. We see Republicans sell people out on, Second Amendment and, things that they're supposed to be fighting for us on. Before we go, I wanted to shift gears real quick and get your take on, this whole fight with Christopher Wray, James Comer, obviously, drafting legislation to hold FBI Director Christopher Wray in contempt of Congress. The fight is over classified information related to Joe Biden when he was vice president. How do you think this will play out, and what does this tell you about Christopher Wray and the FBI right now?
Well, it tells you everything you need to know. What we're seeing is we're actually seeing the facts. We know the truth. We know what's going on with the Biden laptop. We know what's going on with the Biden family and their entire corruption. The American people see it. Wray wants to obviously obfuscate it. And here's the question. Will Congress use the power of the purse to demand that they do what they're supposed to do? I mean, we can pass whatever we want. We can tell them they got to, follow a subpoena. But if we're not willing to say, guys, you're not getting $1 over the FBI until you actually do what Congress is telling you to do, right? That until we do that, then we have no real authority, right? They're not going to listen to us. They just laugh at us. So we'll see what happens during the appropriations process. And one other point, you mentioned the Second Amendment. Andrew Clyde just broke some news, I think, on Steve Bannon's War Room, where he said he was called on Wednesday and threatened that his great bill, the Congressional Review Act, to say that we need to repeal and stop the Biden rule on the pistol braces, right?
Yeah.
Which will make felons out of 10 million plus Americans. He has a bill that would do that. It was on the calendar. It was supposed to come up this week. And he was told by leadership, you vote against the rule, we're going to stop that, and we're going to tell the Senate they should take the lead. So now we got to wait and see what's going to happen, but they might risk our ability to move a really important piece of legislation to protect millions of Americans' constitutional rights because of petty Washington internal politics. That's the swamp.
It is a swamp. Real quick, what should we do with the FBI if we get another Republican in office? Obviously, there's going to be a lot of obstacles in the way, but what should be done with the FBI?
I think there are two concrete proposals that we're looking at, one of which is probably the easiest thing is to at least return the FBI back to pre-9/11 non-domestic terrorism duties. In other words, the FBI, to the extent that it had any usefulness prior to that, it's just sticking to its core job of working about interstate crime, looking at organized crime across states. They should be looking at human trafficking. They should be looking at the trafficking of illegal firearms across the country, actual legal firearms. They should be looking at the massive fentanyl scourge going on, China's involvement with it. Instead, they're trying to make a domestic terrorist out of Scott Smith. Instead, they refuse to work with us about going after and seeing what the Biden family is actually doing. So, look, I think we ought to return to the sort of pre-9/11 version of the FBI. The second thing you could do is break them up a bit. You could kind of more regionalize it and make it more akin to the United States attorney's offices, right? So they don't have as much centralized authority. Allow them to coordinate information flow, but frankly, attach more of those investigative duties to the local U.S. attorney's offices or something along those lines. I think there's a couple different models, but we need to take a real long, hard look at the FBI.
I absolutely agree. Those are good solutions for something for us to look at. Congressman Chip Roy, as always, I appreciate your time. I know you're a busy man. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us on this Friday. Hope you have a great day.
Always happy to do it, Lisa. Always happy to join you, Dan, or any of the other great folks that are out there.